One of the features that stands out the most on the gate that I've been working on the past few months are these carved figureheads. These are nice big figureheads. Kind of think of them as gargoyles, but I guess technically a gargoyle is an architectural feature that drains water. So perhaps grotesque is actually a better term. They aren't representative of anything in particular. They're just something you create out of your imagination. And no matter what you end up with, it essentially comes out correct, as long as you're happy with it. This is also the thing that I most liked about the entire gate design, and I've really been looking forward to working on these. So let's get to work on whatever you want to call these things. This starts with a piece of 1 1/4 inch by 2 1/2 inch bar stock, and I've previously drawn out a 3/4 inch bar to be able to hold on to this, and that's just all power hammer and hydraulic press work, so I'm not showing that in the video. Today's video is sponsored by Blacksmith Supply, your online source for all of your blacksmithing needs. But the first thing that needs to be done on something like this is to define the different areas of the face. I need to separate the mouth and the snout from what will be the forehead and the eyes, and then separate that from what will become the horns. And I'm doing a lot of this with a side cut under the power hammer. It's just faster and more efficient. Certainly if you don't have a power hammer, you can find other ways to do this, but you'd probably want to work in smaller material. This would be a really big piece of material to do by hand. I suppose you could build up the material with some forge welding and do it that way, or get some help with sledgehammers if you have to do it by hand at the anvil. But in my shop, the power hammer is the go-to tool for this big heavy work. It saves a lot of wear and tear on the elbows and the shoulders, and allows me to do things that I probably would shy away from otherwise. I do make sure that the handle stays cool. I quench it every 2 or 3 heats so that I can hold it with a gloved hand. You do have to go back to the anvil and straighten it. If it starts to get too twisty, it'll be hard to straighten later. I'm going to use a wide variety of tools here. I'm not going to specify each and every tool. This is just up to what you have available and what you can imagine. Using fullers to kind of better define the brow and the snout. And this helps ease those sharp corners that I got under the power hammer and makes it a little bit more natural looking thing in the long run. One tool that really makes a big difference doing this kind of work is a vise block. This is about a 45-degree block that goes into the vise so you can hammer against it while having the material clamped up in the vise, and it gives you good support, good angle to work at. It does have to have a little tab under the end of it to keep it from kicking out of the vise, otherwise this would slip. I'm using an eyeball punch that's sort of like a modified rivet set. This one is oval in shape with a round depression in the middle of it. It's kind of a cat's eye look. And you can make these in whatever shape you want, and I've got a video on doing an eyeball punch, and I'll link to that down below. All of the features here I do kind of incrementally. I do a little bit and move from one side to the other while the heat is fairly even, instead of doing one side at a high heat and then switching back over again to do the other side as the heat goes away. So I jump back and forth to try and keep the heat up. And all these features I will come back and revisit multiple times throughout this process. I'm not going to show all that. This is 3-4 hours of carving by the time this is all done. It just takes a lot of back and forth, a lot of reheating, and a lot of times you don't see much happening in each heat. It just kind of defines a little mark, and you got to come back and work on it again later. The mouth is going to get split open, but I'm also going to put in 2 other little chisel lines next to the mouth to define where the lips end and the teeth begin. And those I'm going to set in with a butcher so that there's a clean line at the lips and then it slopes down onto the teeth. That'll make more sense when we're back at the vise using the hand butcher, I think. And I'm also wrapping this around the sides of the face. I want the mouth to be fairly large. A simple little set tool, just a kind of a blunt end punch really. It helps level out the teeth and push them back down where I want them to be. Again, this is just whatever tools you have or feel like making. I have made dozens of tools just for doing this kind of work. In fact, I have another video just on making a bunch of these figure carving tools when I was doing a dragon head, and I will also link to that video down in the video description. You can see here the mouth being opened up wider with a chisel and a butcher being used to define that transition between the lips and the teeth. Already has a lot of character to it. You can tell what it's going to be. There's going to be a lot more little fine detail put in after this. I'd like to take a moment and thank Blacksmith Supply for sponsoring today's video. Blacksmith Supply is located here in the U.S. They sell a huge variety of tools from all over the world, from forges to anvils to tongs, hammers, fly presses, treadle hammers, and now you'll even be able to buy a power hammer from Blacksmith Supply. The 2x48 steel belt grinder from 84 Engineering is available through Blacksmith Supply. They have a huge inventory for things, and if you're just getting started in blacksmithing and are looking for a source from anything from gloves to wire brushes, tongs, hammers, all of that stuff, they're a great place to do business with. I've always had great customer service from them. So whether you're new to the craft or if you've been doing it for a while like I have, I strongly encourage you to check out Blacksmith Supply and see what they can do to help you along your journey as a blacksmith. Now, as blacksmiths, we kind of like to get stuck in the past sometimes and feel like we have to use only those tools that were available to our predecessors in the craft. And that really doesn't need to be the way it is. It's okay to use power tools for some of this stuff. Using an angle grinder with a grinding wheel that's kind of got a flat edge on it really helps me define these teeth. Angle grinder with a cutoff disc helps me cut in the ears and the horns. And the longer I do this, the less I feel like I need to be stuck in the past. And the more I feel like ignoring some of the modern tools, the modern conveniences we have, just limits our creativity. It takes more time, and sometimes we just can't get the effect that we want. Now, there's certainly nothing wrong with a historical approach if you're doing historic recreation, but sometimes it is way more fun and way more creative to use whatever tools and equipment you have at your disposal to make the piece the way you want it to look. I did start cutting the horns with the grinder, but I can't go deep enough with that before I hit the nut on the grinder. So I went to the bandsaw, and you can hear that thumping. That means that blade's about to break, and sure enough, it broke. So instead of taking the time to change the blade, it's faster at this point to just go ahead and cut it with a hacksaw. Hacksaws are a very efficient tool. You can do this hot at the anvil with a chisel. You can do it with a hacksaw. You can do it with an handheld grinder. You can do it with a bandsaw. Lots of different options in the way you tackle these projects. I want to push the ears back out of the way so I can take this under the power hammer. Now I'm going to draw both horns out together. You need to make sure you're well below welding heat when you do this. The last thing you want to do is forge weld these things back together again. But this way you can draw them both out after they're split. I don't know that this is the most efficient way to tackle this, and I don't think I would do it this way again. Probably better to draw them out beforehand. But this approach certainly works, and it's going to get the job done. Now I can clean up these horns and even them out at the anvil. This is another place where the flat square horn on this European style anvil really pays off. Now this is the second head, and I'm going to go ahead and draw both horns out simultaneously under the power hammer, and then I will just split it one time, and it should be a little bit more efficient in the long run, at least it seems like it will be. And I'm leaving a shoulder here, and that's where I'll cut the ears out at. I don't want both of these heads to look the same. I want them to be unique individuals. I want everything to have character. I want it to show imagination. I want people to look at it and take their time seeing the differences and maybe finding some little surprises that they didn't think they were going to see. So taking a little bit different approach on each of these is really well worth the time, and I think it pays off in the long run. Even though I'm not shy about using the power tools when they're the appropriate tool, sometimes simpler is better, and a file is a good way to get in here and clean this up and make sure there's no rag, take any rough spots or fat spots out. The horns don't bend very evenly if they've got thick and thin spots, so you need to kind of take care of that before you get to the point of giving the horns their shape. I will go back and use the die grinder though and create some texture in the horns. There's just some little grooves, and I think it just gives the horns more interest. A lot of animals in the wild have horns that look this way. Now it's time to give the horns some shape, and this is just whatever you think the horns need to look like. Again, the second one of these heads will get a completely different style of horns on them just to make them that unique individual that I'm looking for. I'm sorry I didn't have the camera angle a little bit higher so you could see the horns while I was doing that. After bending the ears back to dry out the horns, they're a little further back than I'd like them. I want to bend them forward. But I don't want to destroy any of the features on the face, so I'm doing this with a wooden block and a rawhide mallet. That shouldn't mark anything up or deform anything, it's just going to bend the ears forward a little bit. I think the sides of this are a little bit plain. There's not a lot going on the sides or on the back for that matter. So I'm going to try and add some texture. This is a little bit gratuitous and just kind of random. And I'm not sure that I'm going to like it very well, but I definitely like it better than nothing. I'm using kind of a diamond point tool here, kind of a modified engraving tool, and I'm going to use a little bit of a center punch, and I'm going to come back with a chisel and put some lines in that resemble hair. And all in all, it does help it out a little bit, just not the thing that I like the most. So the second one, I'm going to try and come up with some better ideas. I want to put pupils in here. I'm using a little diamond-shaped punch for the pupils, just again to add a little bit of interest instead of just a little round dot for a pupil. And some little dimples around the nose that kind of resemble where whiskers would originate, but I'm not going to go through the trouble of trying to put whiskers in. I think anything I'd put in there would be too thin and easily damaged. The teeth, of course, need to be better defined. I have a block in there that needs to be cut and chiseled to actually put the teeth in. I've had some pictures of this online, and a lot of people think this looks like Donkey from Shrek. And I can certainly see where they're coming from, even if Donkey doesn't have horns. But it's very much horse-type teeth. Fangs might look better, and maybe on the other one I'll try and figure out how to put some bigger fangs in it. Those might have to be an add-on piece, and I'm not sure if I want to go quite to that much trouble. We'll see how much time I feel like I've got when I'm working on that. I did not show cutting the tongue out. That was just done with the angle grinder when I was opening the mouth up. That lower block of teeth was way bigger than it needed to be, so I split it in half, and half of it became the tongue, and the bottom half that's still attached became the teeth. And I really like the look of this separate tongue floating in the mouth. So that's a feature I'm really glad I went ahead and did. I'm going to add a little bit of bronze brush on the horns. I'm running this in an electric grill instead of the die grinder. It doesn't need to run as fast as a die grinder would run it. And I want to make sure that I don't snag too much. So a slow electric grill is just fine. And the same thing with a little fiber abrasive disc. I'm kind of polishing up the teeth a little bit so that they are not as rough as everything else. I don't think his teeth should be as rough as his scaly hide is. And for now, I'm going to finish this with my usual paste wax finish. This is just a temporary finish. I don't know what I'm going to put on the gate when I'm all done with it. But the paste wax at least gets a finish on it, so you can see what it's going to look like in the final project. Well, I rather like the way that came out. I'm not sure if it's what I saw in my head, but this is one of those projects that evolves as you work on it. And you see what the material wants to do, and you start to see little things in your imagination that you think, ooh, I should try this, or I should try that. Doesn't always work out, and some things I probably wouldn't do again, like the texturing on the side. I don't really like the way that came out, but I'd like something on the side of this because it's just a little bit of a big blank space. So I'll have to think on that idea for future applications. But overall, I'm really happy with this. This is going to look great on the gate. This one did not get finished, but it's going to be down below freezing for the next 3-4 days. In fact, it's going to get below zero a few days. And that's 0 Fahrenheit. So for those of you in the rest of the world that use Celsius, that's more like 12-15 degrees below zero for you guys. Anyways, I'll finish this one later, and we'll take a look at it when we get the gate all assembled. And I'll show lots of close-ups of everything at that point. But the procedure will be essentially the same. I'll shape the horns different. I'll do something different with the tongue. I think this one I'm going to see if I can find a way to add a tongue that actually sticks out a little bit further, maybe droops down and curls up. Not really sure. Don't know if my idea will work. I could ruin it in the process, but I don't think there will be a separate video just on this one. I do want to thank Blacksmith Supply for sponsoring today's video. They've been a longtime supporter of what we're doing here at Black Bear Forge, and I really appreciate that support. And I appreciate each and every one of you who give your time to watch these videos. That makes a huge difference. So if you've enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like and hit that subscribe button so you'll be more aware of future videos. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop. Make something, but have fun, stay safe, and wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.